So we'll get started with the Fast Five. What's your name?
Dusty Baker,
And what's your farm's name?
Cross Timbers Bison,
Where are you located?
Sulphur, Oklahoma,
And what livestock species do you graze?
the American Bison,
And what year did you start grazing bison?
2018.
Oh, very good. Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Gal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Calling all ranchers, if you're looking to optimize your grazing operation and boost your bottom line, Noble Research Institute can help. The Noble approach to education pairs their own in-field research with the expertise of ranch managers and advisors to find practical solutions to your unique challenges. Now is the time to register for one of their June in-person courses. Noble will be in Jefferson City for Noble Grazing Essentials, June 4th through 6th. In Kansas City for Noble Profitability Essentials, June 11th through 12th. And in Fredericksburg, Texas for Business of Grazing, June 24th through 26th. Noble Research Institute ensures that every insight they share has been tested in real-world conditions, giving you solutions that work, not just theories. Visit noble.org today to learn more about these courses or to register. For 10 seconds about the farm, I purchased a couple of the Teeter Farm Tech automatic gates, and I got those set up this week. It did take me a hot minute to figure it out and get them set up. They are working, but the verdict is still out on them. One hand, they are working. I did have cattle get out twice this week. Once was my fault, and we won't talk about that one. The other time, I'm not sure what happened, and it was where I'd put one of those Teeter Farm Tech gates. I don't know if the gate hooked my poly wire the way I had it or something. I'm not sure. Probably cows backed into the wire and knocked it off a step-in post, something of that sort. I'm not sure. They are working as intended, so I'm getting used to them and seeing how they go. 10 seconds about the podcast. I don't know if I'd mentioned this often, but I'm a web tinkerer. Web tinkerer. I'm not sure which would be correct. I am all the time building stuff, trying stuff, and most never see the light of day. If you've been here for a while, you know I've done that numerous times for the website for Grazing Grass. My farm website's down right now. I almost have a new build of the website available on a new platform, really liking it. But I also have a few other projects in mind. And I was listening to a podcast, and they're like build in the open so people know what you're doing. And to be honest, when I build something, a lot of times it gets scrapped, deleted, and forgotten about. I built a podcast to-do list app, just a web app. I used it for about 2 weeks myself, didn't like it, didn't tell anybody else about it. It's the way it works. But I decided, okay, so I'm going to go to the Grazing Grass community. So you can go there today. You're listening, go to Grazing Grass community. And I've set up a poll of 5 projects, maybe 6, I don't remember, of some projects that I'm working on. They're in varying stages. Some are close to completion, some are further away. But I would like to find out what's important to you, or maybe a better way to say that, what would benefit you. And my plan is check boxes. I haven't done it quite yet, but it'll be ready by the time this episode's out. My plan is for it to be check boxes so you can select all that you think would be beneficial to you. If it's none, choose none. If it's one, choose one. If it's multiple, choose multiple. However, if Facebook doesn't let me do it, you'll just have to vote on the one that's most useful for you. But go to Grazing Grass, please, or go to Grazing Grass Community, please, and vote in that. Let me know what would be beneficial to you, because we want this podcast and what we build here to help you. And with that, let's get back to talking to Dusty. Dusty's a person I've been wanting on the podcast for a long time. We've talked a time or two about getting him on, and I'm finally able to make it happen. He just lives a couple hours down the road from me. With that being said, let's get back to Dusty. So Dusty, get started on your journey. Why bison?
Well, there's a small herd here in my hometown of Sulphur, here at the Chickasaw National Recreation Area, and they've kind of always been here in our yard, I guess you could say, growing up here, and just been very fond of them, and I've just always kind of, admired them, and you kind of can lose track because you just get used to them and being in your hometown. But I wanted to get into, my major was wildlife ecology when I went to Oklahoma State, and growing up in this park and stuff, I really kind of wanted to get in that field. And so I was able to get a summer job in that national park right when I graduated high school in 2004. I got a job in that park, and I was a government rated, employee. And so what I did was, one of my first jobs on a kind of a daily basis was to check the bison. And so initially I, gravitated to that, and we got to go out in the pasture, and that was when, like, I was really up close. You could see them from the fence, and just growing up, you could always see them, but I'm in this pasture now with these animals, and there's a big bull in there, and his name was Crooked Horn. He had this drop down horn, and he was unique. He was really popular, and he was older, but my boss said, take him some cubes every now and then. And so we took him some cubes, which is a range cubes, the 20%, feed. And we went out there, and I just stood in the back of the truck, and he came up there, and he's just so big and massive.
Oh, yeah.
I was just captivated by him, and I got to see a lot of the behind the fence stuff, like in the pasture with them, and I was just hooked, to be honest with you. And so I never, nothing against cattle. We eat beef forever, and I showed sheep in high school, and those kind of animals were just like, oh yeah. But the bison was just a completely different feeling to me, and emotion being around them, and I just gravitated towards that. And so they just kind of hooked me in. And I tell people this all the time, is people say, wow, bison, and I think about, when you're driving across the country, or you're in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, all those places, you're driving up and down the interstate, you turn and you look and see cattle, your eyes go back to the road and you keep driving.
Oh, yeah.
It's just another thing. When you turn and you see bison, you're like, oh my gosh, look at those bison. Everybody looks, you're like, there's a bison right there. And so that's my kind of approach to this, is like, that's cool. That's an animal, that once almost disappeared, and we can contribute to the conservation, preservation of the American bison. So that's why bison.
We go to Pioneer Woman Boarding House fairly often. My wife loves going there.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, the Pioneer Boarding House, that's fine. I go, obviously, because my wife goes.
Yeah.
But then I force her to drive out to the tall grass prairie so I can see the bison.
Absolutely. Beautiful
Yes,
place.
I love seeing the bison out there. And I went through a phase I am no way an artist, but in 5th grade, I drew pickups every day in art class.
Yeah.
And then somewhere through the year, it transitioned into drawing bison every day.
Yep.
You know,
See?
not that you could ever tell they were bison, but they've always been fascinating to me.
Yep.
And I love seeing more. Now, in high school, you mentioned sheep. Oh, man, I did not show sheep. I showed dairy cattle and thought the sheep people were crazy because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree. I was like, why am I showing these animals? Like, and my family, my stepdad Kevin and his mom Grandma Joy, they've been raising sheep since he was probably in middle school or high school.
Oh, yeah.
And so once my mom married Kevin, I just kind of went into showing animals and showing sheep, and so FFA and 4-H and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I was like watching all my buddies, like they didn't work near as hard as I had to because they just, if they're showing their pigs, they're just walking them
Oh,
around.
yeah.
My buddies are pulling their heifers or steers with a lead rope, and I'm like, I'm over here trying to pick this lamb up. And
Yeah, and when I went through school, they were shaping those sheep like every week. They'd
Yeah.
have them in there on the stand,
Yep.
trimming it. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah,
that
all
just
of
seems
it.
like a lot of work.
It was. I learned a lot from it. And
It's good.
yeah, patience was a word I probably would
Oh,
say
yeah.
the most.
And you mentioned OSU in there, and the only thing I really want to pull out from there, I went to OSU, except I wasn't as smart as you. When I got to OSU, I got a job on the OSU dairy farm
Yeah.
and worked out there.
Yep.
What did you do while you were at OSU?
I was lucky enough to have one of the coolest jobs I think any college student can have. I was a football equipment manager for the Oklahoma State football team. So just a student manager. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm completely envious of that. I love OSU football. I love OSU and getting to do that. It's quite fascinating. And while we won't cover more of your time on this podcast, I think this is Oklahoma podcast. You were on there, and you all talked fairly lengthy about some things about that time. So if the listener's interested, I suggest you go check out that
Yeah.
podcast, and we'll put a link in our show notes to it.
Yeah, that was a great podcast, Mike.
Yeah, I heard that. I was like, oh, that would have been a dream time down there. I
I
don't
know.
know. Probably got in more trouble than I would have needed to. So
It was. I had a lot of neat experiences, and I can say I worked for Coach Gundy, so
yeah.
pretty cool.
So you make this decision to get some bison in 2018. How did that decision go? How did finding land to run cattle? I mean, I say cattle. I'm so used to saying that to
It's
run
all right.
bison because it's always a resource that we've got to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I just honestly, my wife and I, Marissa, we're working our full-time jobs and stuff, and I just kind of turned and looked at her. This is before we got married. We were still just dating, but I kind of looked at her and I said, hey, what do you think about raising bison? And like her, she was like, yeah, let's do it, And so kind of jumped on board. She said, I don't want you to wait 5 years or 10 years down the road and say, I wish I would have done this. So
Oh, yeah.
we just jumped into it, I guess you could say. And the reason we could jump into it, when I say that, is because my mom and Kevin had a property in Sulphur, and we were still living in Oklahoma City at the time in our careers and stuff. And it was possible because they had an old dairy farm, and some of it was ran down and stuff, but there was some fencing, there was an old corral, we had water, and so there was a sort of something there that we could do. And so that's when we went and we got our first 5 in 2018, May of 2018, 5 yearlings, and we brought them home to Mom and Kevin's place, and we put them in the corral, and from there, we just expanded. We did a lot of work. We did a lot of welding, we built fence, new water systems, And that's basically how we were able to, is because Mom and Kevin essentially, they weren't doing anything with their land. And so we could, turn it into a sort of a small bison place. And so we were so lucky because we would work in Oklahoma City, and then Mom and Kevin mostly, he had experience with bison before, and he was the sheep guy again too. So he had a lot of experience with exotic animals. He had worked at Arbuckle Wilderness for a while back in the 90s. And so it was like this perfect deal for us to get started. And he took care of them during the week, and then we would come home on the weekends. So
that really made it nice while you were working away
yes,
to have someone there to take care of them.
Yep, it was.
To get the farm ready for those first 5 bison, did you have to do anything special to the fencing, or was fencing and infrastructure already in place?
There was some fencing, and there was an old corral. We had to raise a couple bars up. We had to weld, some height to it. Like, we took this old dairy place and just we worked on some of the pens and stuff. As far as the fencing goes, we built new exterior perimeter fences, and we do 6 strands of barbed wire. And so that's what we did a lot of on the exterior. And then our cross fences, we did, I think, 5 strands of barbed wire. And it's all the standard heights of a regular fence. We just use 6.5 foot tall T-posts instead of 6 foot, and we drive them in the ground further on those 6.5 foot. And then of course we put that top strand of barbed wire at the very top top. Yeah, as much as we can. So yeah, we did all that, and there's a lot of learning of stuff in there. So of the bison.
You'd had some experience with bison during your summers before.
Mm-hmm.
What surprised you initially about those 5 yearlings?
Well, just their uniqueness. They're just so family oriented. I learned real quick just how social they are, and kind of how much they count on each other. And so that was kind of one of the first things. And in raising them also, I was really worried about them people just think that they're mean and that they're going to try to hurt you. And it was really the opposite of that. The more that we were around them and interacted with them, it just chilled them out, and they were used to us. They weren't bouncing off the pins and stuff. So my initial thought of, I know these animals can be a little crazy. It was not like that. Of course, we were nervous, but they really chilled out because we gave them good water, we gave them hay, and we fed them, and they appreciated that. And so we just kind of acclimated together. I mean, it's just like any other animal, but the bison gets pointed the finger at them for being wild and dangerous, which we know they can be, but they weren't. So
yeah, on that, you treat cattle badly, or you can have a mess there too real quick, a wreck.
Absolutely.
And one thing we notice as we do daily moves with cattle, you're out there so much, the cows are so calm because they're just so used to you. Yep. So being out there with your bison really helps with that.
Absolutely.
Or I'm assuming.
Yes, it does. Makes a huge difference. I will say that probably the biggest thing we learned is in the early stages, the first couple of years, I will say that handling them, and when we work them, when you actually run them through a squeeze chute and stuff, that is really where you have to manipulate your handling facility, your systems, your runs, your alleys, all that. That was a big learning curve for us because within our first year, we started with 5. We had a 1 bull and 4 heifers. Within our first year, we lost one, and that was hard because we had to load them up on our trailer. We drove them to the vet clinic, and to Doc Parsons. He was the guy we actually got him from, and he's a vet. And we took him to him, and we came home, and one of them had been gored, and
Oh, yes.
never even got back out of the trailer. So, wife looked at me and said, we've got to put a handling facility in. We've got to put some time and money into it and get our own squeeze chute. And so that was probably the biggest challenge in the early days, is figuring that out and how to work them safely and get their dewormer and stuff. So
Is them gorging, boy, figure out how to say that. Is them gorging each other a problem when you haul them? I mean, obviously it was a problem that time. Is that a common problem?
I think so, and I've seen it, but this one just happened to get it in the right spot. It's like,
it's just one of those fluke
it's just one of those deals, and it just, kind of like where you would shoot a deer, kind of right there behind the shoulder. That's where we found it. But so obviously it hit a gentle area, and it happens, and I've seen it. It just happened to be in a bad spot. But the thing is from there on, I was like, okay, well, next time we move these animals, let's handle them differently, and let's put them in different holding cells inside the trailer, because it's like studying your animals. I know this one's crazy, and I know she's gonna beat up this one,
right?
And so you got to think about all those things, and it's how you work them, how you load them, and then from there on, we've just managed that better and how we put them on a trailer. So, but it's gonna happen,
right? Throughout this journey, you started, and Kevin was helping with taking care of them. You were working in the city and coming back on the weekends. When were you able to make the transition and spend all your time out there?
COVID is whenever that happened. So we had Brooks, our daughter, and right at the beginning of like February of 2020, Brooks was born. A month later, spring break hit, and I was still coaching and teaching. And basically at spring break, that's when everything kind of went nuts. And I never set foot back into the classroom again. What we did in that is Marissa was on maternity leave. I went on spring break, and then it never went back. So we got to work from home. So we moved. Well, we didn't fully move, but we started staying in Sulphur. And that's where I was able to spend more time with the Bison, focus on the YouTube channel and stuff. And then anyways, life went on. We got out of the COVID days, and Marissa was still working a full-time job, and I stayed at home and was being dad for a while. And we did the Bison thing, YouTube, and then we have a rental property of some cabin rentals down by Arbuckle Lake. So I was doing all that, and she actually had to drive back and forth, and she would stay in Oklahoma City. I think she did that for about a year and a half. And finally, when she got out of that career, we landed and stayed in Sulphur. So all that COVID stuff, I don't know, people say it all the time, but it just got strange during that time. But it was good for us. So
COVID hit, or spring break hit, and then midway through spring break, we're not going back to school. I was in school administration then, and we were meeting all the time, trying to figure out what in the world was going on, what we were going to have to do. Yeah, it was a crazy time.
It was. Yeah, so I resigned. We went on spring break, and then I resigned in May. And so I got 10 years of teaching in, basically.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, was the Bison starting to be self-sustainable, or was that more Marissa's working off the farm, she can help support the family and the farm. You're able to dedicate more time into it and grow it. And
Yes.
also, you've got some cabins in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. She was still working and kind of taking on that load, and I was updating the cabins and trying to do the bison thing, and then I was doing the YouTube thing as well. So yes, kept her, working definitely helped keep everything going, and we kind of made that decision so I could be a stay-at-home dad and do all those things. And yeah, we managed it for a while, and when people ask, when you're wanting to raise bison, I kind of warn them about the time it takes to ever start making a profit off the bison.
Oh, yes.
Because bison take longer, basically than twice as long in some cases than cattle per se. When you get yearlings, which is what we started off with, which is great, because they were still little, and you get used to them, they get used to you. I really like that. But if you think about this, if you want me to run with this.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point, because as I think about it, in my limited knowledge, I'm guessing you're not breeding them till 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then you've got to get a calf out of them that's going to be a year later. And then you've got time before that calf is finished. So yeah, break down that time frame so we understand that.
Yeah, you said it. So bison are able to breed at 2 years old. And, bison are like deer, elk, moose. They breed one time a year, a certain time of the year, and then they're going to calf a certain time of the year. Now you're going to have some randoms in there, but they're essentially like a wild animal. Their clock is like a wild animal. And so they turn 2 typically in the spring. We just say May because that's an average. So they'll turn 2 in May. In July and August, it's breeding season. So that's when hopefully they get bred. As long as a woman, so right at 9 months, they're going to carry that calf. So you should have a baby in the spring. So now we've had this baby in May. And then, like you said, whatever we're going to do is this calf, let's look at it at the meat side. If we've got a bull calf, we've got to wait another 2 years before he hits at least 1,000 pounds.
Oh, yes.
It's going to take that bison at least 2 to 3 years, a bull, to hit at least 1,000 pounds. I'll try to shoot for 1,100 or 1,200 if I can. And then, it depends on what you want to do, whether you want to sell your weaning calves. I wouldn't sell a weaning calf until at least 7 months old. And we've changed some things over time. We leave them on their moms longer and all that. So, yeah, I mean, you turn around and look, you hadn't made $1 in 4 or 5 years.
Yes, it quickly adds up.
It does. And so for a bison rancher, and this is where I tell guys that are interested in doing it, I'm like, you can't make this a full-time job, unless you're already farming or whatever. And I'm lucky. I've been able to do it because of my wife set us up for this. And then the YouTube, all that helps pay for everything. So you're not going to make any money for 4 or 5 years if you start off with calves or yearlings. And I'm like, you're going to have to still work because these guys always want to.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that people want to raise bison. We need more bison ranchers out there. But it's difficult if you don't have a way to pay for that until you get to that 5-year mark. So, yeah, bison take longer.
Yeah, just one thing you mentioned there on YouTube. When did you start YouTube, and when were you able to start seeing some return from YouTube?
So I started in 2019, almost a year after raising the bison. I was like, man, I was just naturally an educator. Obviously, I loved being an educator and coach. And so I was like, I'm doing all these really neat things. I'm experiencing all these neat things with these animals. And Marissa and I, we'd sit at home before we had Brooks, and we would look into bison social media
Oh, yeah.
and stuff. And to be honest with you, like on YouTube, there was nothing out there consistently, or just in general, there was not a lot of information on
Oh, yeah.
bison. I mean, there was some Ted Turner documentaries and some conservation stuff out there, but nothing consistently. And I was like, I love these animals. I'm passionate about them. I'm doing this right now. I'm raising these animals right now. I'm going through these beginner stages. I know there's people out there that would benefit maybe and want to raise bison. And so I'm like, I'm just going to start recording it. Very uncomfortable, but to start, but I wanted people to see our journey. And
Right.
I honestly, in YouTube, you have to hit certain thresholds before you ever start making an income off of it. And I forgot honestly what it is. You have to have so many followers. You have to have so many hours of watch time.
Well, Dusty, it's 1,000 hours or 1,000 subscribers and 400 hours of watch time in the last year.
It is. Okay.
Because I know that because my channel's not quite there.
Yeah.
It's getting close.
We can work on it. Yeah. So, and then, but I did that in 2019. I forgot all that stuff since then, but I don't know, to be honest with you, when it started, but what really started changing as far as the YouTube goes is when I was consistent. I started being able to post every Sunday and Thursday, and I've been doing that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. I feel like I've been consistent, and when I started being consistent, that's where I started to basically see some of that revenue. And then whenever I resigned as a coach and teacher, I put more time into the YouTube. And so I would probably say that 2020 mark, 2021, and of course people were staying at home more.
Right, right, yeah.
So
I know during COVID, I started watching marble races on YouTube, which is just ridiculous.
Hey, we all were just getting by,
Right.
So, but I think that's when I started. I was like, okay, I can pay a feed bill. Maybe I could go buy another bison, start that kind of thing. So I think it took a couple of years before. There was at one time I was like, okay, we're heading in the right direction, because now I'm making more on YouTube than I am as being a teacher. And I get to stay at home and be with my family and do these things that we love to do. And so that's where I was like, okay, it's working. I think it's working.
Yeah, right. I think talk to a lot of people about social media and growing a following. Consistency and quality is what I always hear brought up.
Mm-hmm.
But I lean strongly towards that consistency. I've seen some stuff out there that's just awful, but they post every week, and people, there's a podcast I listen to, and they have co-host on it, and they changed out one of the co-hosts. Did not like the new co-host at all, but I like the content. So I listened for a few times, and now she doesn't even bother me. So it's like, once you've heard someone or listened to someone a few times, your opinion, if you're not immediately turning them off, you grow to like them even better. So I think that consistency is the huge thing there that really elevates your game.
Yeah.
And of course, this is from me, someone who doesn't have very many followers on YouTube and the podcast. Well, we're making it, but
yeah. Hey, but you're right, because that's where I saw the growth, is because honestly, once you start getting those followers, like you're talking about, the loyals, those loyal people, they're sitting there I'm not saying they're sitting there, but they're waiting on you and they're counting on you to put out that episode. And so, if it's, I think of Yellowstone. You watching Yellowstone series when every Sunday at 7:00 we were sitting down as a family ready to watch the new episode.
Yeah.
That's the same thing for a lot of these loyal followers. And so that's, you got to be consistent and build off that.
Right. I totally agree with that. Podcasting, YouTube, you have people. I know I have certain things, certain YouTube channels I watch at a certain time, certain podcasts I listen to on a certain day, so I'm expecting that to be there.
Yep.
Transitioning just a little bit from YouTube into regenerative practices. How have, regenerative practices have really came, or I don't know about to the forefront, but it's being talked about a lot more. As you try and be more regenerative, what does that look like on a bison ranch?
It's been hard. I won't say it's been easy. There's a lot of input that has gone in, and we're in the early stages of it, I know, because there's a lot of learning for me, but I love it. I really like it. I've enjoyed this transition, and when I say it's been difficult, it's been a lot of learning, some mistakes, but, I had to get rid of a bunch of bison. I had to, when we got what I call the Ponderosa, when we got our ranch here, Marissa and I's first ranch property in 2021, we hit it hard. Like, I went out, I invested in some really good breeding stock, and I think we were up to, I don't know, we had a lot. I don't know, Marissa probably knows it better than me, but we had almost 40, a herd of 40, and we had 199 acres here. And so I'm like, we got a lot of grass, we got more land, let's go. And I learned real quickly that we had too many. And I work with the NRCS, and my stepdad, Kevin, works for the Noble Foundation.
Yes.
Well, the Noble Foundation did the switch to regenerative, I don't know how many years ago, and they cut a lot of employees, and Kevin made it through all that because he was, they love him and he does a great job there. And Kevin was learning all this regenerative stuff as Noble was switching. And so I started hearing that more, and Kevin would come home and tell us these things that Noble was doing. And so all that kind of started going in my mind. Working with the NRCS and some local burn associations and watershed associations, it was like, this is one whole picture. Let's do it. I'm like, everything is making sense. Now let's just put the time into it. And so I've had to decrease my bison herd, and now we're down to 20 in the Big Joe herd. And I've got cover crops out here. I'm sitting here looking at them. I got cover crops out there hip high, and I love it. I mean, it's awesome. And, it's really cool. And I like to use the word holistic. I'm a bird ding dong. I like ornithology, and, I care about what birds are out here, all those things. The dung beetles, and I don't know, it's pretty fun. So I enjoy it, but.
Just off topic just a moment. Birds, I don't know how big you're into podcasts, but the Science of Birds, I love that podcast.
Really? Okay,
So
I'll add that.
Science of Birds.
Science of Birds. I like it.
So when you think about regenerative practices, one of the things, or you're moving your animals more often. Are you all able to do that with bison? As we try and mimic nature, a lot of times we come back and say, well, bison grazed in really closed herds and they migrated across the landscape. Do you still see that the bison graze very close to each other? Are you having to use electric fence, or all your fencing permanent? How are you facilitating that movement, or do you need to?
Yeah, when we first went into, kind of building all this new fence around the property, that's when the regenerative thing kind of started coming in. And one of these NRCS guys I work with says, well, I was like, yeah, I want to cross fence this because I was signing up for the equip program. And I was like, yeah, I really just want to cross fence this. And he looked at me and said, why? Why do you want to do that? And he's like, I get it. You know, you want to use the program and stuff. And he said, why don't you just move them and let them decide without building a fence, let them decide where the grass is, you know, and so all that kind of started dawning on me. And then we also use prescribed burning, patch burn grazing, essentially. And so the bison do still do the same thing, like you're saying. They graze in these mobs together in one group, and they're all moving constantly together. And so as we've done this more regenerative thing, I want to mimic what they would do, you know, in the 1700s.
Oh, yeah.
I want to replay that inside of a fence. Obviously, it's very
Right.
difficult to repeat history, but
Yes.
you know, the way I want to treat them, I want to treat bison like bison. And so last year we put in our very first hot wire, and this spring, early summer, I'm actually going to do the movement of mob grazing or adaptive grazing for the first time because I've got them trained with a hot wire.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to like move them on a daily basis kind of deal. And this is where I struggle a little bit because I'm like, okay, well, if I want bison to be bison, you just let them roam. You know, let's move them from this 80 acres to this 80 acres to this 40 acres constantly, right? But
Right.
bison are picky. And I went to an understanding ag training with Gabe Brown and Alan Williams. And it was at the Bad River Ranch, which is one of Ted Turner's ranches up in Pierre,
yes.
South Dakota. And so I went to that training for a week, and we actually went on he's got 2 properties up there. And we went on and looked at the bison, and there was this young girl, like she's, I don't know, 18 or 19-year-old college student out there at the Bad River Ranch. And she's moving 200-ish yearling heifers around with one strand of hot wire out in the middle of the Great Plains. And I'm like,
Oh, yes.
oh my gosh. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, if this 18-year-old girl out here can do this with over 200 yearling heifers on a, you know, I don't know how big Bad River Ranch was, but it's massive. And I'm like, if she can do this, I'm like, that's what I want to do. And that's where I kind of learned about Gabe Brown and Alan. You know, they were like, you got to force them to eat it. You got to, bison are picky. And you just got to force them to eat it, hold them there for a little while, and then move them. And so that's, maybe me and you can talk about this at the end of summer again, and I'll tell you how it went. But I'm going to try it.
That'd be great, yes.
But I've been training them with hot wire, and I'm training adults. I should be training the calves and the yearlings, but I'm training adults now, and it's been a challenge, but they honestly are respecting it. And so it's been working.
Oh, very good. That'll be interesting to see how that goes. And as we mentioned, you've got that YouTube channel so that people can follow along.
Yeah.
And we'll have to get an update out there on the grazing grass.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. But I'm really anxious to do it, and I'm really happy with it's raining right now, and we've had a lot of good rain here recently, and so.
Oh, we have, yeah.
Yeah, I know you've been getting some out too.
Yes, except I'm living wrong. Here we got 3 3/4 inches over the last weekend.
Yeah.
So all those days I didn't dump rain gauge. My parents live 2 miles up the road, and I think he said 6.5 to 7 inches as well.
Wow.
So it's like,
oh,
wow.
What happened?
And we don't graze any cattle up there where he lives. That's actually my grandpa and uncle graze cattle up there. I'm like, I need to water down here.
So that's crazy. I think we got 5
Oh,
that.
yes.
Yeah, so it was really good. But it, I'm anxious to get out there and try it. And the great thing is about the whole regenerative thing is it's, these bison love native grass. And so,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
we have we're trying to restore native prairie and stuff. And so I enjoy that part of it. And yeah, so
Very good. It'll be interesting to follow along with that,
yeah.
Dusty. It's about time we transition to our overgrazing section. But before we do you have anything you want to add before we jump into our overgrazing section?
No, I don't think so. I can talk bison for a long time, so I don't want to
Uh,
get carried away.
and, and I think that's great. I try and monitor the time a little bit. I'm
Yeah,
I'm going longer on podcasts because actually that's the complaint I want that I want. No, that's the complaint I get. I get people saying they could be longer. So
really,
I'm
that's
I'm
good.
trying to lean into that a little bit more, and it's longer than what I typically listen to a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, except I've been paying attention. And actually I'm listening to longer podcasts. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a natural evolution, I think. So we're going a little bit
Well,
longer than
good.
we normally do.
Okay.
Let's transition to our overgrazing section. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. And for overgrazing section, we're going to take a deeper dive into something about your operation. And the thing we're really going to talk about is getting started with bison. So you mentioned earlier that, hey, we could use more bison out there. How would someone go about even getting started? Are there special permits needed? I know you mentioned on fencing what you all did, but just kind of talk through that process for someone who's interested to get started.
So to have bison in the as far as Oklahoma, as many, I mean, lots of states. If you're considering most of the farming states, I guess, I don't think there's any permits that you have to have unless there's some strange state out there. But you don't have to have any special permit or anything, first of all. But one of the first questions that I always get is fencing. People always want to know what type of fence you have to have bison in. And the most important thing about bison ranching is you got to keep them happy. You keep those, and that's just, I think this applies to any domestic livestock,
Oh, yeah.
That we talk about. But you've got to keep those animals happy. You give them fresh water, good water. You got to give them hay, whatever time of the year. Give them grass, and give them some cubes and treats every now and then. And that's
Dusty, I'm going to stop you right there. That's how my wife keeps me happy. She makes some cakes and cookies and yeah.
yeah, that's the same thing. You gotta, so, and yeah, I always talk about a home base. They need that home base, and they need that feeling of like, hey, I really like this place. And so with that, the fencing thing is, like I said, we do 6 strands of barbed wire for our exterior. We do our T-post every 10 feet, I think. And and like I said, it's almost the same height as a typical cattle fence. We just drive those. We get a taller T-post and we drive it down further to like 4 studs, I think, is where we go to above the flag. And keeping them happy, staying in your fences. I've had issues where my only issues is one, it's human error. leaving a gate unlatched or not paying attention to your water crossings. Those are human errors. Those are things that you can control.
Oh, yeah.
Patch and fence up and those things. Where you can't control bison is two bulls fighting. They're going to knock your fence down more than likely. And that's, you're just not going to stop them. There's nothing you can do until they're done, they're done. Now, that only typically happens from July to August to September, right? Breeding season. That's when things get hot and heavy, and we've had to manage that. So again, it's good management. We have a mature bull and we have a younger bull. We don't put two matures together. That's where you've got issues. And so you can manage it like this. So, and maybe I should go back a little bit, but one of the first things that I learned when purchasing bison is Doc Parsons told me, he said, when you buy bison, make sure you get good ones. Make sure you get good animals. And I think that applies to any type of livestock that you get, depending on what you're doing. But of course, in this case, I wanted a good breeding stock to start off with. And luckily I was, Doc is my mentor today and has been since we purchased bison from him. And we started off with good genetics and a good breeding background and stuff. And so that was kind of my conservation herd. And I've built off of them, and I still have them today. And so I think it's important to start off with good animals. You got to have good conformation, pay attention to the genetics side of it. And then, you can really dive into the fencing and the watering and the handling. Handling is probably your next biggest challenge, like I was mentioning earlier, is having a good handling facility.
Yeah. Let's talk about good animals.
Yep.
For just a little bit. We had Becky on the podcast a few episodes ago, and she was talking about, start with quality animals. And when we go out, as we've got beef cattle and hair sheep, I can identify good animals, look at their genetics, their pedigree and stuff, and know that. When you're looking at a bison, how do you know it's a good animal? What are you looking for?
So I did livestock judging when I was in high school, and I learned how to kind of look at animals. I wasn't the best, but I learned a lot about it. And I think about a cow, I think about the square body of a cow, the length and the loin. That doesn't deviate very far off of bison. Now, bison is built different, right? The hump changes things up, but honestly, I go back to those basics of what I would learned as a livestock judging, looking at cows and bulls and stuff like that. You want that box figure. Now, the only difference is I raise plains bison. That's my focus. There is two species of bison in North America, and that's the woods and the plains. What you see mostly in the United States, 90% of it is the plains, right? That you're thinking the Native Americans, the bison roaming, right, way before us, those are plains bison. The woods bison are up north, Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Even into Alaska. So on the plains bison, one of the things I look at is that top hump. The top of that hump, it needs to have a gradual slope all the way down to that pin of that tail, the very beginning of that tail, right? And so you want that natural slope to occur, and that's a plains bison typically. And so I kind of look at those. I want the box figure. You want the brisket to the hump to be deep. I go back to a lot of those things, and when it comes to woods and plains, you need to know what you're looking at, because and also that's the breeder's responsibility to determine if they've got woods in their breeding stock or not. But also feet is important in bison. If you're looking at the top of their tail and you look straight down, it's no different than how you would judge cattle. You want the top of that tail and that foot to be a straight line all the way down. And because you want those animals, if they're going to be your conservation herd or your breeding stock, you want them to pass on all those good traits to your offspring. So those are just some examples that I look at.
Yeah, excellent examples there, and way to visual or to auditorily tell us some visual identifications we need to look at. One thing you mentioned there was woods versus plains, and to look at and be able to tell. Is there DNA testing to identify which subspecies or species do you have? Or are they visually different? Like you can look out there and say, oh, that's a woods, that's a plains. And of course, if you start crossing them, that dividing line gets blurred.
It does. And that's where, as bison ranchers, that's where, and this is becoming a more popular thing now that you're bringing it up. There's people that are mixing those woods bison in with the plains, which I'm not a huge supporter of, but you can definitely look at a full woods and a plains and you can notice the difference. Like one of the differences is a woods bull or a woods bison, their hump comes more forward to the back of their neck. And woods bison are typically taller. They're kind of a bigger framed animal.
Yeah, a northern animal.
Yeah. I mean, pretty typical stuff. But they're more narrowed bodied, to obviously fit between the trees in the woods.
Oh, yes.
Unlike a plains is going to be more of the bulldog front, like a, American bulldog or whatever look. And then also Neogen and the Canada Bison Association offer woods and plains test, which we've partaken in before. So you can pull hair or get a tissue sample from their ear, and you can send it in, and you can get a woods plains test.
Oh, okay.
So
and that'll come back and say what percentage of their DNA is either woods or plains or
Yep, and you can do that to verify it, which I try to encourage people to do that, just so when you sell those animals, you know what you're getting, and there's proof there. But you can look at some of the plains bison that are crossed with woods, and you can see some traits in there that are, obvious. Hey, this is a woods, this is a plains, but they're toying with it, and they're making a different animal. And I think genetically, we need to keep them separated. But that's another story.
Yeah, another story, another debate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. When we think about someone getting started with bison, they identify good animals and are able to get started. Are you only going to go into the cow-calf portion of bison reproduction, or is there a feeder industry as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. You need to know your goals. What, why are we raising these animals? Are we doing it just for the nostalgic of being in your pasture, or are we going to go after something here of breeding stock or meat? Whenever I got into it, I was obviously passionate about the animals, and I wanted to be a part of something of trying to raise an animal that, the numbers almost just disappeared. And, so I wanted to be a part of something. I wanted to contribute to that. I wanted to raise them mostly for breeding. That's when I started paying attention to genetics. But then I realized, like me and you talked about earlier, we're in this thing, but we're not making any money, right? Because it takes so long with bison. So Marissa and I started thinking, well, and we started building a following and stuff. And we're like, how can we share the goodness of bison with people and the quality of the meat? And so we actually had to go out and buy some meat bulls. And that's where we started our meat business. We kind of just jumped the ship faster. We just went to it quicker. Because we wanted to figure the meat thing out. I'm like, well, golly, we're not making any money. We gotta do something here. So went and bought some bulls, and we started in the meat thing there, processing and all that. And so I think that was 21 maybe when we started that. And that's when we got into the snack sticks, the jerky, and then the frozen meat. So yeah, it's definitely like, are we just going to do a cow calf or are we going to do meat? Because in this industry, there's a definite line there. There's some people that are just raising for meat. All they care about is weight.
Oh, yeah.
And then I know this goes on cattle too, but there's a side that's focused on genetics and breeding good animals. So I'm a focus on genetics and breeding guy first. And then I'll take whatever animals that I don't think personally are meant for breeding or should be in the breeding line. We'll take some of those and put in our processing side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
Now, with someone thinking about bison, is that something that you're only going to run bison, or could you run bison with cattle, or is it preferable or suggested you don't?
I would say no. People have asked me that. I wouldn't encourage it. I'm not saying it's possible because it is possible. I know there's people that do it. You do have a chance of creating a beefalo, I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
somewhere in there,
Yeah.
depending on what your program is. But which I highly discourage beefalo, but I think you could do it, but it depends on obviously how much ground you have and stuff. Something that we've talked about is integrating goats. And here's where it gets really interesting is, you see the multi-species grazing methods, by some of these regenerative people, and I think it's awesome, and I think it's really interesting. And we honestly thought about integrating the goats, but here's a trick in bison. There's a disease called MCF, malignant catarrhal fever, and goats has not been proven that goats can carry it, but sheep 100% carry it.
Oh, yes.
And it's typically hair sheep. Hair sheep
Oh,
carry it, and I don't know. It depends on what vet you ask, but I don't know if show lambs can carry it or not. But I know that 100% hair sheep are probably the number one on the list, which is tough because the hair sheep industry has grown in our world.
oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I get it. That's a good deal. It's great. I mean, I've got friends that have them, so they carry that, and it's a very ongoing and popular debate on that. And so honestly, I wouldn't even take the chance of sheep at all. It's like an
Oh, yeah.
airborne disease. They can get it within 5 miles, supposedly.
Oh, wow.
And
And with the popularity of hair sheep,
yeah,
that's going to be covering huge
huge
areas.
areas, yes. And the goats, it hasn't been proven yet that they carry it, but there is a consideration that they can be a carrier. And
Oh, yeah.
the thing about bison is if they get it, they'll die off like 3 or 4 days. It's a
Oh,
very
wow.
quick and painful death they go through, and so it's a touchy subject in the bison world for sure.
Is there a vaccination for that,
Not
or
yet.
even work on it? Because
They
the bison industry is not huge, so
right.
getting someone to work on it may be a little bit of an issue.
They do have a vaccine out there, but they haven't released it yet. We
Oh,
get
yeah.
updates on it every now and then at bison events, but they have something, but they haven't released it yet. And I don't know much about it. I know that the state vet here in our state of Oklahoma is considering pushing some laws, about people bringing hair sheep in or people bringing bison in and kind of protecting the farmer rancher from, insurance wise and all that. So it's kind of, it's touchy because it can be very detrimental to bison, and it can happen fast. So
Well, I'm not familiar with that at all. Yeah, and we run a few hair sheep
yeah,
here, so yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, it is. And I know the hair sheep, it's popular when, we're not very far from the Dallas metro,
Oh,
two
yeah.
hours, and there's some ethnic groups there that just, that love those type of animals, the meat and stuff. And so I see more hair sheep around here. Obviously, there's the some around us they're far away, far enough,
yeah.
but it hasn't affected us. But I could see ranches out there, and I know some ranches that have had to deal with people bringing in hair sheep and, on the other side of the fence, and it's scary.
Yeah.
So, but going back to it, I honestly considered the goat thing. I'm just a little scared, honestly, I'm sure that we could run let me go back a second. I think a lot of these, and I'm not trying to point the finger at hair sheep. I'm just saying I think that a lot of these animals that go through these sale barns are getting it and they're passing it on.
Oh, yeah.
And then hair sheep only shed that disease during a certain period of their life. They're shedding it or whatever is what I've heard. So
yeah.
I don't know if it's manageable yet. Yes, it'd be awesome if there was a vaccine for it, because if I could give something to some goats, like we're trying to cut off our riparian zones. We're trying to do that now and protect our creeks and stuff and riparian zone. And so I would love to throw the goats in there just to make up the difference, but it's scary.
Right. That's a big risk because bison is your business.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be very careful about that. And what I'm also hearing, that if you're interested in bison, that may be the area that you want to go into. You may not want to consider some of these other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. How have you found, and this a little bit off of getting started with bison, but just if you're getting started with bison, you're looking at that end market. So how's the meat market for bison meat? How's the breeding stock market for bison?
The meat's great right now. We're at some of the highest levels of pricing in 5 years or so.
Oh, yeah.
We're, bulls right now, I think processing weight bulls, over 1,000 pounds are in that $4.60 range or somewhere in there. It was.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty good right now. Last sale season was the highest it's been in a long time. And I think the key about the bison industry, if I go to the bison conference every year, and you've got 3 or 4 huge bison marketing processing guys there. And, their thing is there's just a shortage of bison. And,
oh, yeah.
You kind of look at that, and I think, personally to me, if you look at the cattle industry and where it's at, and you look at the bison industry, bison meat is becoming more popular. People are realizing the benefits, the health benefits of it. And I think there's always going to be a shortage of bison. Does that make sense?
Oh,
yeah. I think it's growing. And so, these animals were in the millions here at one point, and obviously that's changed. I think we're around 500,000 or 600,000 now in the U.S., and I could look up the stats for you and give them to you. I get emails on how many bison are being processed and stuff, but according to those 3 or 4 big companies, there's just a big shortage. And so they're encouraging more bison ranchers, which is something that I've done since I started raising bison and doing the channel, is encouraging people to raise bison because I think they're just cool animals. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, the turnaround on, we talked about this earlier. If you get started in bison, it's a while before you have any marketable animals.
Absolutely.
And it's more so than even in cattle, because you're working with some shorter or some longer times, I guess would be the correct way to say that. So that market is going to be very slow to change and react. Do you see, is the pricing of bison related at all to the pricing of cattle?
I think if you ask some guys, they'd probably say yes. For me, it's hard to, I don't know. I think it probably does, especially like the imports and stuff, all that.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of went on. You saw the price of, well, it's interesting because whenever the Mexico thing happened and there was a shortage there and the beef prices are still going nuts, the bison prices went up as well.
Oh, yes.
And so it makes you kind of think, okay, well, there's something going on. And like, I'm I'm not smart enough to figure it out, or I don't dive into it enough,
Right.
but, and that's just not me. I probably should pay more attention to it, but there was that all happened at the same time. So last year I was saying we had all these, the breeding stock prices were higher,
Yeah.
and the meat, and I think it all is because of the meat deal. And because you can buy cows, people were paying, because of the shortage of meat, people were buying cows and using cows as part of the processing. And so the price, because there was a shortage, the price of cows went up, and the bred heifers went up, and the calves went up. And so that all started last year. By the same time, some of those imports stopped. And anyways, one of the things about, you were kind of hitting on it, is you have to wait until they're 2 years old, but that's why people may not understand that bison, why it's so much more expensive. When you go to the store to buy bison, why is it so much more expensive? Well, you can get that steer at 18 months. You can get him 1,000 pounds at 18 months. It's going to take 6 more months to maybe get that bison bull at 1,000 pounds, And so there's a lot more inputs during that 2 years. And so that's why bison, I always like to tell people, well, here's the reason why bison's so much more expensive. And there's just more time, more input for that rancher, more grass, more feed. So, that's something to consider, why it's more expensive. But you're also getting a very lean, low in cholesterol, low in fat, animal meat, healthy meat. So
Before we transition to the famous 4, are there any tips on cooking bison meat?
Absolutely, yeah. I always tell people, because we're used to cooking beef so much, if you are chicken, whatever it is, but like for us, it's beef. Don't overcook bison. It's very easy to do that compared to beef. That's why I use beef as an example, because you may throw on a beef ribeye, and you cook it X amount at this temperature. A bison is going to cook much faster because it is so lean. So the key is, for people cooking bison, is don't overcook it. And I will say that if you have a bison well done, I'm a medium rare guy, and most people in my family is medium rare. If you eat a well done bison, you're more than likely probably not going to like it. I would never encourage somebody to overcook bison. And I say that, and I warn them, because I don't want them to have a bad taste and a bad, feeling with the bison.
Right.
Because then you're like, well, I don't like it. Why would I ever eat bison again? And unfortunately, this happens. If you go to a restaurant, you get a burger or a steak or whatever, and they're cooking bison. If they don't know what they're doing, they overcook it, and you eat it, and you go, well, why would I ever go and buy that again?
Exactly.
They're just going to go back to beef.
Yes.
And, whatever's comfortable to them. They're like, that bison was terrible. So just don't overcook it. It cooks much faster.
Excellent advice there. I don't believe, as I'm thinking, we've ever cooked bison. I've had bison out at restaurants, but we haven't ever cooked any.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you need a box sent to you.
It does. Yeah. My wife will be so excited I found something else to spend money on.
There you go.
Actually, wait. You should have sent a box of bison meat so we could have discussed it on the podcast.
Okay.
Wow, I missed a great opportunity there to say,
well, maybe if we come back to this, I'll let you know the disaster of trying to do adaptive grazing with bison. There we go. Yeah, we can set it up.
Dusty, it's time to transition to the famous 4 questions. Are you looking to add functional traits to your cow herd? For over 30 years, GBT Angus has been developing cattle that best fit a low-input environment. Fertile, functional, practical, and predictable Angus genetics are their core breeding values. They implement a short 45-day calving season to ensure only the most fertile genetics get replicated. Their no-touch policy also stabilizes Kevinese, maternal intelligence, and the convenient traits of sound, functional udders and feet. Visitors are always welcome. Join them for their annual online 2-year-old bull sale, held every third Friday of March. Please accept this as your invitation to visit about anything genetics, grass, or cattle management. Visit www.gbtangus.com or catch them on Facebook or X at GBTAngus. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And our first question, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
My buddy Carson, which is your buddy too, recommended Dirt to Soil. And
yes.
I love...
He's big on that.
Huh?
He's big on Dirt to Soil.
Yeah. Carson introduced me to that, and I listened to it driving to pick up Bison on a long journey one time, and I loved it. So that's where it started for me. And then I went to their class, and so it all made sense for me.
Very good. In fact, I need to reach back out to Gabe Brown. Like early on in the podcast journey, like episode 30, Gabe, I had it set up for Gabe, and then something happened and we weren't able to make it happen. And I haven't ever got him back on the calendar. I need to get that
you do.
done.
He's a good one to listen to.
Yeah. Our second question, what's your favorite tool for the farm?
That's going to be really torn between my hydro bed, which is my, arm bed for hay. But to be honest with you, the year-round tool is going to be my 3C cattle feeder, bison feeder, I should say. But the cube feeder is the number one tool because when they see it, they know what they get.
Oh, yes.
And having those cubes, this goes back to keeping bison happy. They'd follow me to town in that thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because they love those 20% cubes. And it is probably the ultimate tool because I can move them anywhere I want.
It's the ultimate tool with cattle.
Yeah.
And even if you're doing grass finish, you can feed just a little bit of cubes, and then you shake a sack, and they're right there.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
You better love them. You don't get into this thing because you want to make a bunch of money. You got to love the animal first. They have a unique history. We're lucky to have them. And I think if you think, I would encourage conservation-wise how you can be a part of something to bring back a very unique species of animal that just was by the millions. It's such a keystone species on the Great Plains, and you get to raise it. I would just encourage you got to love the animal. And if you love the animal, you put time into them, you keep them happy, they'll love you right back. Don't be afraid of them. And sometimes you just got to jump in, and that's exactly what we did.
Get started.
Yeah.
Lastly, can't even talk anymore. Lastly, where can others find out more about you?
You can email us at xtimbersbison@gmail.com if you're interested in raising bison. And then all from our website, you can kind of get and follow us along there. It has our links to Instagram, Facebook. We're also on TikTok. And of course, our main channel is YouTube. And then we have our merch and meat when we have meat in stock. And we have native pecans and some clothes all on our website at crosstimbersbison.com.
Very good. Dusty, really appreciate you coming on. I'm starting to say that, but wait, there's one more question.
Yep.
What question do you have for me?
So I kind of thought about it earlier. So you're an Okie, so you've been around them for a while, but I always want to know what's people's first thought of like a bison? Like what is your thought of maybe I always want to know people's opinion of what do they think about raising animals. Not that you want to or would, but what is your outside perspective of hearing the word raising bison, of that thought process?
I would love to, except, well, first off, like I said, in 5th grade, I remember transitioning from drawing pickups to bison.
Yeah.
I've always loved bison. And we go over to Tallgrass Prairie so I can see them. White Oak, I'm not too far from there.
Yeah.
And the little Shawnee Indian tribe used to have a herd of buffalo over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go out of my way to see them because I just think it's so wonderful to see them. And you read about those descriptions of the bisons on the Great Plains, and we'll never see those images they describe with words in those journals. And it's just hard to fathom even that because they just talk about it blanketing an area and how they migrated. So I come to them full of fascination. And if there was a way for me to raise a few, I would do it. And I say if there was. There is. But for one, my facilities would not handle bison.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it cost effective for me because at the same time, I'd love to have some out here just even as pasture ornaments.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still would need a facility to handle them. And I love seeing what you're doing there with them. I love how you all interact with them. But I just think because of facilities, it probably won't happen here.
Yeah.
But I do find them fully fascinating and interesting.
Well, good. That's, that helps me because I always kind of want to know what people think from an outside perspective of what we do. And you kind of said it a little bit and made me think of it as the interaction. I think a lot of our followers love the interaction between me, our family, with the bison. And I know this is where I struggle a little bit of filming and creating content, but doing it in a safe way of not showing that, hey, I'm going to go out here and hug this bison and try to take a selfie with it in the middle of the pasture. I honestly struggle with that all the time, but at the same time, I want people like to see me interact with them. Not that I'm going to go up and hug them out in the middle of the pasture, right? But it's finding that middle ground of being in a safe place, filming it and showing the interaction, but also not trying to encourage people, such as like at Yellowstone. I know that's
I know that comes to mind. Yeah,
it does come to mind, and I see the videos all the time. We always see the bad of Yellowstone National Park. And that's just because people are failing to pay attention to the signs or the warnings and how dangerous that animal can be. And I know I'm kind of getting a tangent here, but the bison gets the finger pointed at. And being this dangerous animal. And we know that, like, I call them America's athlete. They can run, jump, knock you, go through a wall. We know they can do all those things. So it's trying to, show people that that's not how it is. They just want to roam and eat grass.
Right. And they're reacting based upon their nature and the way they would react to alleviate a threat in their past, the way they're trained to alleviate a threat. And if you're getting into their space, that could be a problem. And when you're talking, I don't want to say wild, but maybe bison that's not as intensively managed as yours.
Right.
Their flight zone or their zone of fight even is going to be greater than what yours are.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
And the public doesn't always realize that. But that when we say that, that's the same for our beef cattle out here. You take a ram out here, you might want to be careful turning your back on a ram.
That's very true.
So people just have to be aware. Yeah, they are animals, and they're reacting to the way they were created, just as we react that way too.
Yeah, and I'd like to just throw this little piece in here, just for people that are listening. That if you do go to Yellowstone, here's two things that are going on during that time, and this is where you mostly see all the injuries happen. Of bison attacking a person, is there's two things going on in the national park at this time of the year, when in the summer. Okay, in May, they're having babies.
Yeah,
those mamas, they change that mindset, and now they're keeping the wolves away. You know, That's their job. And then also a very high intense time when Yellowstone's getting most of the visitors in the park is July. There's something else going on in July. It's breeding season. Those bulls have got it on their mind, and they are going to keep everything away from those females as much as possible. So the most popular time to go to Yellowstone between May and when school starts, there's a lot going on.
Right, because both of those times, whereas, most other times they would use flight to get out of a situation, but a cow with a baby calf can't use flight because the calf may not be able to go with her for some reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, be aware when you go there.
Be aware, yes.
Try not to go there in the summer anyways. I wouldn't say that. I'd say go in October. That's when we went. It was magical. So.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Anyways.
Well, Dusty, really appreciate you coming on and sharing today.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun. We got to do this again.
Yes, I'm game. We probably need to put it on our calendar, or
That's right.
I get busy.
Yeah. Or we just let that email slip by.
Or that happens,
Yep.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. Gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.